Hello, my name is Evan and welcome to The Big Dry, but an episode with a bit of a difference. Now, The Big Dry is a solo RPG series, a bit like Dungeons & Dragons, but not really. We're using a game system called Ironsworn, but we've taken Ironsworn and we put a bit of a spin on it. Instead of being a sort of fantasy adventure story, it is more like a detective crime story. We've shifted things away from drawing swords and fighting, and now it's become a bit more about a war of wits and words in sort of conversations that are rolled like combat, like with people sort of making verbal jabs and cunning rebuttals, but again in that sort of Agatha Christie crime context is the kind of idea. We also investigate crime scenes, and this is the exciting thing. The reality is, even though I'm playing this game, even though we've got these rules in place, I don't know how this story ends. We are having these conversations with characters, we are rolling on random tables, and we're receiving clues in that way. It's our job as the detective to try and figure out what these clues mean, how they all fit together, and whether or not they'll solve the crime or not. Which brings us to an exciting element of this whole experience. You can join in. You can join me at home. You're able to comment in the description down below what you think would be the solution to the crime. And that's what this episode's about. I'm calling it a notebook episode. I'm going through the notes that I've been taking throughout the course of this series. We're halfway through all the investigations. So I thought I'd stop, share that with you guys so that you can maybe try and make your own deductions. Obviously go back, watch the episodes. They're hopefully relatively entertaining. But I don't know, if you haven't got the time, if you want something a bit snappy, if you want to just be on the same page with me, knowing what notes that I have taken, this is the episode for you. So we'll go through scene by scene, identify the specific clues, and at the end of this I've got my own sort of theories and ideas and questions that I'll share with you now, what I'm personally thinking as a player might be going on, my own little curious thoughts as to what things mean and deductions that I've made. But you can do the same as well. So in the comments below, you're more than welcome to share your ideas. I'll have a bit of a read. I'm not saying that I'm going to follow them. As we get further on in the series, I'm going to basically look at those less and less because I kind of want to make my own decisions at the end. But this is a great jumping on point for anyone who wants to, and a great point for us to have that sort of conversation in the chat. So please do so. But nonetheless, get comfortable, get something enjoyable to eat or drink, and let's go through the notebook and figure out what on earth has been happening in this first half of the case. So our story opened in the New York Hotel, original name I know, and as I said, David Race got accidentally bundled into this crime. He's investigating the murder of a British diplomat called George Templeton. George Templeton is a diplomat who works for the British government. He works in basically land acquisitions, the idea. He works with a guy called Patrick Instow. Patrick Instow was the guy who mistakenly got you involved in the case in the first place. So we investigated the crime scene. We made it like a nice bloody crime scene, but from that point onwards, we were rolling on tables and stuff like that in order to identify what were the clues in this crime scene. So as we went in, we had a look at the body. We found on the body that there were some massive wounds to his arm. They were wounds, not self-inflicted. So lots of blood, pretty much that's what killed him. Blood loss from the attacks on his arm. We also found on him some other bits and pieces, including a scrap of fur. He had a scrap of fur in his hand from like a fur coat. From a fur coat, probably. Who knows? We also found he did indeed have a knife on him, a knife that had been used. Whether it was used in that attack or not, or another time, we don't know. The weirdest thing on him, in his pocket was some moldy meat. Just some moldy meat was in his pocket, which made no real sense. Like we found out later, it's like a pepper steak type stuff. So he has moldy meat in his pockets. David Race then proceeded to investigate the rest of the room. He saw that there had been signs of a struggle. Things had been knocked about the place. He found a family photo of Templeton and his wife. We saw a picture of the man, well dressed, scars on his hands. We also found, quite intriguingly though, in the fireplace, a burnt letter. There was a burnt letter, and on that letter was the name Captain Darcy. We didn't know who that was. It was just some random person called Captain Darcy, but it was a clue. Lastly, there was just a government safe in there. There was a government safe in the room. It wasn't like the hotel safe. It hadn't been tampered with. It hadn't been touched, hadn't been scratched. No one had tried to get in violently. So there it was, just sitting in the room. We then proceeded to investigate Peter Instow himself. A strange, panicked man, not a very nice man. Not very intelligent, not very well educated. He pretty much just got his job because he was rich and landed, really Aristotelian in that kind of way. And so now that he was in this crisis, he had no hope of actually sorting anything out. Racist, he was a racist dude. Again, with all our characters, we're actually rolling on tables, including the Une character creator. And we got the fact that this guy's a pretty nasty piece of work. Pretty useless as well. But we had a conversation with him, we had a back and forth. We found out that he and Templeton were indeed working together for the government. They were business associates. They were here to buy land. They were here to buy land for some sort of project. He was very standoffish with what that land was for, but he did reveal that that's what they were there for, buying land for the British government from the American government, making sure all that happened smoothly and fairly. He really didn't share much. He was all a bit panicked. He didn't want to say anything, but we did eventually get into a position where he could answer a direct question. These conversations, they happen a bit like combats, where we're asking questions back and forth to each other, and depending on if we're lying or being earnest or trying to threaten each other, it depends on how well that conversation goes. And if it's a successful conversation at the end, then we're able to ask one question that they will then answer as truthfully as that conversation allowed. Okay, we did indeed get from Patrick Instow a straight answer about what he saw the night of Templeton's death, which wasn't much. But before he died, he did see Templeton down in the hotel lobby. He saw him down there. He went down like after evening dinner or something like that, and he saw him talking to a person, a shrouded figure, trench coat, hat, that kind of thing. And he even gave this shrouded figure a briefcase. And then they left through the back doors. When he went down, he went and joined him by the bar, and he sort of said to him, well, what was all that about? And he didn't answer. We rolled on a dice to find out, from the Iron Sworn tables, to find out what's going on here. And basically all we got was that he was withholding the community. He was holding something back from his community. He held something back from Patrick. He was like, oh, a loyal servant like you should know what I'm doing right now. And that's all we got. So Patrick went to bed, and the next thing he knew, he was dead the next morning. So that's what we got from the very first opening scene. Mouldy meat, gashed arms, and a blithering idiot of a witness who basically just sees things in cliches. So that's where we're at scene 1. Scene 2. So in scene 2, we learnt that there had been a mysterious figure move through the hotel, talk to Templeton, and leave out the back. It was specifically out through the back of the kitchens. So whoever this person was, they either knew people in the kitchens or they'd made a brave dash through there, and it would have caused a ruckus. So I figured, that we would go and talk to the concierge. The concierge on the desk that morning wasn't the same one at night, so I had to find out who was on the night before. And interestingly, the person who was on the night before wasn't their usual guy. He was a temp sort of thing, like a trial period. And he had been fired that morning. So something had happened. I don't think we've really found out what. It was a bloke called Mark Colden. They revealed this information to us on the proviso that we'd go and talk to him about getting Mrs. Jenkins' car back, because he borrowed Mrs. Jenkins' car, because he's a cad like that, I guess. But yeah, we found out Colden had been fired that morning. They gave us an address to where he meant to go, as long as we got the car back from Mrs. Jenkins. We went out on the street. We saw that all the alcohol was being poured out that morning, because literally it was the beginning of Prohibition. We also went around the back to the bins to have a rummage through to try and find some meat, mouldy meat, from the pockets. But we bumped into a sort of a lower ranking chef instead, and through a bit of conversation, we figured out that indeed the meat had come from that hotel, from that kitchen, about 3 days previous. So he had meat in his pockets from 3 days ago. We went to the address given to us by the current bellhop for the old one from the night before. Mark Colden. We went to Mark Colden's place. Nice place. Nice place. Not the richest place in the world. Not super fancy high class, but kind of nice for a bellhop. Went in. We put on the pretense of that. I'm Mrs. Jenkins's nephew, and we're here to collect the car. So went in. He let us in. As we looked around the apartment, we saw the keys. We also, for the car downstairs, so the car was still there. But we also saw there was a broken window out the back. Like we sort of glanced down the hallway, there's a broken window. Glass broken on the inside. We had a conversation with Mark, and that conversation didn't go very well. Rolled a lot of really bad responses. And basically he was all like, all shut up. We both were pretending to be something that we weren't. But we're just two liars basically lying at each other and getting absolutely nowhere. And in the end, we did manage to get a weak hit. We had to basically to bribe him to tell us what he knew. And what he knew was interesting. So he let us know who this shrouded figure was. It was an artist. Okay, it was an artist. It was actually a lady. And what made her stand out was the fact that she had a shaved head. Okay, and that's what Mark said. He said, we saw this lady. She was an artist collecting the art piece and leaving from, that's why she went out the back kitchen. She was actually there to pick up the art piece out the back. She must have come forward just to talk to the dude, and she was leaving pretty normally. That's why it wasn't sort of strange. But what was strange, what he noticed was, she had this shaved head. Oh my goodness, like she was a rather nice looking lady, except she had no hair. That's what he says. So that was the strange thing. That's where who this person was. So we now knew this artist. He didn't say what her name was. He didn't know her name. He just knew her as an artist coming to pick up her art piece. That's what he said. Now, I may have been rash in this scene. Having failed in the conversation so dismally and wanting to get my own back at this fictional character that I'm making up, I went to go and steal the car keys, like sleight of hand these keys so they could take the car back to Mrs. Jenkins. Not so much to help Mrs. Jenkins, but just to annoy Mark, to be perfectly honest. It didn't work. It broke out into, at first, a fist fight, and then guns were pulled. Fortunately, Race was able to escape down the fire escape, but not without Mark screaming and firing a few shots at him as he leaves. So, quite dramatic. A little bit of injuries occurred to David in that scene. Gee, that's exactly how you want your interview to go. But that led us into scene 3. See, Mark probably should have gone to the hospital, because that's what you should do if you get injured and stuff like that. But he figured he would leverage his injury to maybe get a bit more information. He went to the police department, the big central police department in New York. He went there with a plan to be like, well, what I could do is I'll go in and I'll claim I was attacked by someone else, that I don't know who was attacked me. Look, I need help. And they'll show him in, maybe to a police inspector or a chief of police. They'll be apologetic, and he will sort of pretend he's an upset British diplomat and get information out of this bloke. That was the plan. But instead, who we got was a female police officer. They did exist back then. They were specifically undercover police officers who would go out and investigate crime for women, basically. And her name was Harriet Bartney. Harriet Bartney, she sat down with us and she had a chat about at first trying to find out who injured us, who hurt us. And what my plan was to lie to this person, thinking that this flat-footed detective would be all, I'm so sorry, sir, we'll do what you want. And we're going to say, I was shot at by someone called by Captain Darcy. Remember that name in the fireplace? And that way we try and find out some more information about who Captain Darcy is. That was the plan. We did put that name past her. She registered it, but she did not bite. She was like, no, this is stupid. What are you going on about? In the end, though, at the end of that conversation, we managed to sort of get her to a position where she was a bit agreeable. But at the end of the conversation, it was a weak hit. She kind of didn't buy it. But she was someone who was investigating the New York hotel. She was someone that was watching the vice and corruption slowly creeping into her city and wasn't happy about it. And she wanted to do something about it more than just what her role, and specifically her role as a woman, allowed her to do. So she saw that maybe if I can get this race guy working for me on his British diplomat end, because she thinks that he was like a British diplomat type, then maybe I'd be able to get something going and actually find out what's going on in the general sort of corruption of that hotel and some of the dodgy goings on there. That was her intention. That was what she wanted to do. What else did we find out about her? Well, we found out that dodgy things were going on in that hotel. That hotel in general is bad news. But most of all, we managed to get a partner in this case. Harriet Bartney joined us. She joined our party, and she now was able to help us as the case progressed. We picked up one of the perks that you can find in the Iron Sworn series. These perks help you in your roles, basically, but also a bit of a hindrance with being a pretender. So if we ever did a really bad roll, she would see that, and we'd have to basically try and cover for ourselves as we move forward. So both a asset and a liability, Miss Bartney. It's going to be interesting to see how that relationship continues to play out. But she did lead us deeper into the police department. The police department did happen to have evidence from that case had been brought in. So, like I said, evidence, the investigation notes, the body itself. So we were able to see what the information that the police had gathered from the crime scene. That's in addition to what we had found. They found there was actually a false bottom in one of the cupboard drawers that had a key to the apartment. So someone had a key to this apartment and hidden it in the drawer in the apartment. But this wasn't as nearly as interesting as two other pieces of evidence. Firstly, in an air vent, they discovered like a bottle that had like a rag in it, and the air vent was pumping this sort of like gas smell into the apartment. It was like a sedative. And when they looked at the body, that it was a known sedative. They knew what reaction the sedative had to a body, and they found that on Templeton's body. So he had been affected by the sedative during his murder, basically. But also, interestingly, they had talked to witnesses in the other hotel rooms, and there was a busybody who had heard something the night before. They noticed someone come to the hotel room. They knocked on the door. They went in, and a few hours later they left. And they thought they were staggering because they might have been drunk or something, because they were a bit worried about that. But it turns out this person was in fact the shaved-headed lady. It was the shaved-headed lady who had visited that night. And obviously there'd been a tussle in the room. There was furniture everywhere when we investigated, but the witness said she heard nothing like that. She was like, uptight, couldn't go back to sleep, didn't hear any sort of violence, any sort of tussle. At least not that they heard from across the hall. So, interesting. So the shaved-headed lady becomes even more of a suspect as she was there. She was there at that crime scene. But did she do it? Right, so with that juicy breadcrumb in mind, it's only made the bald-headed artist lady very, very important to this case. So what we did, we went quickly back to the hotel. We kind of glossed over this in narrative slightly and found out who she was and where she was residing. We found out that her name that they had was Janet Mayhern. Janet Mayhern was the name of the bald artist. And we were given an address. So we went to that address. We went to find out what was going on, maybe try and talk to her or something like that. Instead, Mark Colden turned up. Mark Colden came down the street in, of course, Mrs. Jenkins' car, and he went into this apartment block, a very rundown, not rundown, more like sort of bohemian type apartment block. So, stealth mission time. Myself and Miss Bartney snuck into the apartment and nearly fell off the building in doing so, but in the end we're able to get into the apartment and listen into the conversation that was being had between Mark Colden and some other mysterious person that we had no idea who it was. So the conversation revolved a lot around her and she. So we're assuming that was Janet, or possibly that's her name, Janet. And whoever this person was, they were terrified. They were freaking out. They apparently had escaped somewhere. We're assuming somewhere like Europe, maybe. We don't know. We didn't see them. I affected a bit of an accent, but it wasn't really a real accent. It was kind of this mad makeup thing. But they'd run away from there nonetheless to come to America to escape hate. But in the end, they found an equal amount of hate here as well. So they were freaking out. In the end, Mark calmed them down, saying, "You got to trust us. You got to trust us. She knows what she's doing. She knows what it's like to be in your shoes, whatever that means." But nonetheless, they're afraid. They're afraid of what's going on in this city. But Mark calmed them down and said, "Just hang tight. We'll be okay. Just keep your door locked." So we also let him get away. We snuck out, and there we go. So we had this mysterious figure, and we had Mark Colden becoming more important in this case beyond just being a receptionist who got kicked out. And then that brought us to scene 5. So that lead kind of ran dry, but we still had a Captain Darcy. And fortunately, we had Mrs. Bartling on our side. She had run that name through the databases. She got a call back saying that they not only knew who Captain Darcy was, but they knew where he would be, like at that moment, like late in the evening, his usual haunt. We went there expecting a sort of a rough and tumble bar fight, maybe something like that, but the place was quiet. The place was still, the place was abandoned. Turns out that this bar was the only bar in the entire city that appeared to actually be enforcing prohibition. So the place was quiet. All we met was an old sailor sitting and smoking a pipe. We don't know who that was. We had a conversation with this man. We talked to them about what they knew and how to load pipes appropriately. And in the end, he revealed that he did have some knowledge of goings on between Americans and British individuals, British government officials. In fact, they had gotten him to help scout out and scope out possible coastal estuaries that they could purchase. And he'd heard nasty rumours that the British government were using these estuaries to kidnap people, or at least transport them out of the country, probably via kidnapping. He himself apparently gone to one of these estuaries at night, fishing, and he watched, and indeed he did see British ships moving things back and forwards, probably kidnapped individuals. The idea from what he's heard, their rumours, is that basically people would escape to America, try and hide, try to lay low, and what the British government would do is they would send people across there to collect them and bring them back to the UK. Not necessarily always above board in that respect, or maybe it is. Who knows? It's just the rumours of an old sea dog that we got from this bar. We did roll to find out if it was Captain Darcy, because I was just curious, and it is. And so they do a bit of a wink and a nod. Oh, I've scratched your back. You're going to scratch my back later, aren't you? So who knows? Who knows if Captain Darcy is going to be help or hindrance? Who knows? But that's it. That's what I've got from the notebook. They're all the clues that I've had so far. They're things that you could also be putting together with your at home. Let's have a talk. So, this is the fun bit. Like, what does all this mean? So let's start with the crime scene, for example. When we investigate the crime scene, we assumed there'd been some sort of fight. I've got to be honest with you, my imagination went crazy and imagined like basically an animal being in the room. That's why the meat was there maybe, the knife was there in self-defense, that's what the gashes were maybe. And that still might be the case, we don't know. But then we got the whole sedative situation. So, was he knocked out? Was he unconscious when he was attacked and died? Was it made to look more violent than it was? Might have been. And obviously, the bold artist, Janet, she was there at the time. She was seen at the scene. Did she go in and like finish the job? Is that what she did? She wasn't very subtle about it. She got spotted. Maybe she went in to find something else. He could have been dead by the time that she got there. Maybe that's why the key was in that drawer. Like she had a second key. Mark was on desk after all. So maybe she had a second key and she put that in the drawer like when she let herself in and saw the body, saw him dead or whatever, and let herself out of there. So either she's involved or we don't know enough. There's enough for her to either be actually involved and she did kill him, or she might have discovered the scene. Who knows? we really do need to find her and talk to her and figure out what on earth is going on. But the thing I'm really curious about is Mark Holden. So Mark Holden, when he talked to us, he described this bald-headed artist as if he had never seen her before in his life. Like he's like, oh, I only observed her because she had a shaved head and didn't know her name, didn't know anything about her. But he knows a lot about her. He is involved in whatever's going on. Like he knew her apartment when he was talking to that guy, whoever that was. He knew her, what she'd gone through, what they were doing. So he actually did know her, and yet he didn't say that. Why? What's going on with Mark? Was he trying to throw us off the scent? Was he only revealing what he knew that we could find out from other people at the scene? Is he trying to throw her under the bus? Is that what's going on? Because he could have just not sold us. He could have just said, "Oh yeah, he talked to a person. The guy was 7 foot tall, big beard, scar on the face." Like he could have lied like that, but instead he gave us a description of who she was and her address. So no, the apartment, the hotel gave us the address. Look, he told us who she was. He put us onto her. Why would he do that if he's trying to keep whatever subterfuge he's a part of a secret? That makes no sense at all. And then we have the recent revelations of what's going on with the British government. What's that about? Why they're kidnapping people? Is Patrick involved in that? Was Templeton involved in that? And if Templeton was involved in that, why was he keeping something secret from Patrick? You know what I mean? Like clearly there was a rift there. So was Patrick involved in the kidnapping and Templeton was trying to prevent it, or was Templeton involved and Patrick is just oblivious to all this? And why is there moldy meat in his pocket? What? So there's some of the questions I have at this moment. I think I've got a lead, and I think I know what I'm going to do next in this thing, but it's going to require a little bit of luck, well not luck, a bit of appropriate roles to make it work. But also in the context of the narrative, it may be putting some people at risk, potentially innocent people at risk, but Race needs to kind of do this sort of like risky gambit in order to proceed further in the case and find out what on earth is going on. Who killed Templeton? Who is this bold lady? And why are there so many people in this city completely racked with fear and paranoia, other than the fact that they're all trying to kick the habit? Well, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. This was a quick one, just a recap of everything that's happened so far. I'll try and get together scene 6 together soon, so that way this will be quickly followed up by that case. I'm really enjoying this series. I'm glad that people are starting to watch some of it. I hope those who are really enjoying it. If you've only seen this episode or the recent ones, can I encourage you to go back, go watch. I only told you about the clues that we found. I didn't tell you everything about how we got them. So I can encourage you to go back and have a watch. And like I said, let me know what you think in the comments below. Who did it? Why? What's going on in this case? And we'll see how many of those things are proven or disproven as the investigation continues. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you see me more again. Fare thee well. Ooh. Dum. Dum. Is that that? Dum. Maybe it's that. Da-da-da-dum. Dum. Dum dum dum. 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 What was that?